So today we will talk about functional examination in an orthodontic point of view. So diagnosis cannot be restricted to evaluation of the teeth alone, but to emphasize the three-dimensional nature of an orthodontic problem, I would like to elaborate on functional analysis of the orofacial region. We know that the normal function of stomatognathing system promote normal growth and development of the orofacial complex. So we will discuss in detail about what the normal functioning and if an abnormal function exists, what can be the various malocclusions that can coexist with that. So during the developmental stages, we have to assess four important functions like the respiration, mastication, swallowing, and deglution. So during these developmental stages, let us see the respiration in detail. The upper airway, which is including the nasopharynx, the lower airway, which is the oropharynx. Okay. So even though the nose forms the primary portal of entry of respiration, the mandible and tongue posture are the major determinants. Mandible, when move down and forward, tongue also does move down and forward to establish an airway. The children are obligate nasal breathers, and so if it is blocked, it becomes a difficulty for survival. So, in that case, what they do is they start to breathe with the mouth. For example, if this airway is getting disturbed, for example, the upper airway, if there is some polyps or some other organic pathology, or the turbinates, if it is getting disturbed, the child will obviously try to breathe through the mouth. In that case, what happens is the tongue that is getting normally pushed forward will not happen. So the mandible will be pressed down by the tongue action more because of the normal action of tongue pushing up is absent. So what happens is the tongue falls back and the mandible also falls back. So it will eventually end with a retrognathic mandible. And also postnatally, the tongue, the hyoid, okay, and also the larynx here, all should coexist or all should cohabit with one another in pushing back or pushing forward or pushing upward in a same direction. If this patency is getting disturbed, obviously it will result in some kind of functional abnormality. So what I'm trying to point out is, though we talk about respiration, how it can affect the mastication and all, how also it can affect the swallowing. If in that case, if there is any problem with the mastication also, there will be some respiratory disorders and swallowing. Or if there is a neuromuscular problem with swallowing, it will eventually affect the tongue movements and eventually the respiration. So this patency, how we can divide is the nose and the oral cavity patency will depend upon the tongue. The pharyngeal patency will depend upon the tone of the soft palate, tongue, and the pharyngeal wall, and the larynx via the various cartilages. So overall, they contribute to the growth of orofacial bones. So what is the basis of all this is the functional matrix hypothesis. What functional matrix hypothesis, the most supported hypothesis in orthodontic says is soft tissues are essential for the growth and development of the hard tissues. A simple example I would like to cite is how a periodontal ligament supports the tooth development. And also coming to the mastication. Mastication is comparatively different from what the other types of the functional analysis that I told. For example, respiration, your swallowing and deglution is like mastication develops only with the teeth erupts. So in a newborn child, you don't expect teeth to be there. So initially, it is the swallowing and the suckling reflex that was present gradually gets transformed to mastication. So initially, the swallowing and suckling that was present slowly gets dominated by the mastication. For swallowing and suckling to be active, it is the seventh cranial nerve, which is the sensory nerve, that is the most important. Whereas for a mastication, it is the trigeminal nerve or the motor nerve. So gradually, the sensory reflexes also gets changed to a motor reflex component. And also the swallowing and the suckling reflex starts as early as the 14th week itself. But this mastication will become little bit active when the teeth starts to erupt, that is during the 6th or 7th month. But a fully transitional masticatory reflex will be evident over the period of 12th year. So this takes place from the period of 6th month to the period of the 12th year. So what happens from the 6th month to the 18th month, where you have a full set of deciduous dentition, is a solid diet, sorry, a liquid diet gradually gets transformed to a mixed diet. And from the deciduous dentition to the permanent dentition, a mixed diet gets moreover transformed to a more solid diet as well as a mixed diet combination. So in that case, if your tongue is not responding properly, if your swallowing reflexes are not good, and if your airway is not patent, so in that case, your entire neuromuscular control is under question. So in that case, obviously the nerve supplying the muscles of mastication will also be under a insult. In that case, when your mastication becomes difficult, when you find when the mastication is very difficult, you are not able to chew the food properly. So the muscles of mastication are also going to be very weak. So you'll have a very flaccid extraoral musculature. So what happens is during this period of time, or alternately or subsequently, your phonetics also gets disturbed. For example, in a class 2 division 1 cases, you will have difficulty in pronouncing the bilabial consonants like P and B, and also in anterior open bite and sibilants, you will have difficulty in pronouncing words like D, T, and Z. Now, we will see some video demonstration about the various movements that can be observed in functional examination. Yes, see, this is how swallowing reflex is there. See how he swallows and what deglution. Though it looks much more, it's a simple, we will look in a detailed way. See, this is the phase where he actually masticates. And when he tries to swallow, what happens is that is the food that is present. When he tries to swallow, okay, which is a voluntary phase, the buccal phase is a voluntary phase. So when he tries to swallow, what happens is the tongue touches the anterior part of the palate. So in that case, your food cannot escape this way and obviously it gets pushed down. When it goes back, it is a soft palate that goes and closes the nasopharynx. So there is no escape way of the food to the nose or nasal regurgitation that can happen. So when they comes to the pharynx, it is the oropharyngeal receptors that is present here, creates a sensory engram, and it sends information to the medulla oblongata and the lower pons. So thereby, new stimulus gets registered, and when the food comes down, it is the epiglottis that closes the inlet of the trachea or the nasopharynx, so that food doesn't get entered into the trachea and the food goes into the esophagus. Now coming to the temporomandibular joint. Yes, temporomandibular joint examination is also very, very important in case of a functional examination, because the movements of the TMJ is obviously, if it is very smooth and passive, it is showing that the dentition is also in harmony. Whereas if the movements of the TMJ is not normal, it can affect the normal occlusion and it will result in some trauma from occlusion or bruxism. This is the normal anatomy of the TMJ. This is the glenoid fossa and this is the condyle, and this is mandible and this is a maxilla or the cranium. And these two components are joined and intervened by a disc. This is called the articular disc. And this disc area, the posterior area, is known as the retrodiscal area. And the very unique property of the temporomandibular joint is it is the only joint in the body to have a superior joint space as well as an inferior joint space. And also this is called as a compound joint. What compound joint basically means is it essentially contains three bones. So what are all the three bones that we know here? One is the cranium or the base of the cranium or the glenoid fossa, we know. The second one is the mandible. What can be the third bone? Yes, according to the recent classification, what they say is it is the disc that is considered as a non-osseous bone. They consider that as a non-osseous bone. And that's why the temporomandibular joint is called as a compound joint. And also, it is called as diarthroidal because it can move freely in various planes, and it is also filled with a synovial fluid. We'll see in detail some of the more and what are all the kind of movements that is peculiar to TMJ? Yes, two kinds of movements also occur, which is also unique to this joint, which is the gliding or translation, that is the forward movement, and the rotation or hinge, that is the rotational movement. So this rotational movement occurs in the inferior joint cavity, and this rotational or hinge movement occurs during the first 20 millimeter of mouth opening. The normal mouth opening is 40 to 45 millimeters. During the first 20 to 25, it is the rotation or hinge movement that is occurring in the lower joint space. And next is the translation or gliding movement that is occurring in the superior joint space, and that is during when the mouth is opened more than 20 millimeters. What are all the determinants of mandibular movements? The condylar guidance and the incisal guidance. Okay, what is the condylar guidance? It is the relationship of the maxilla and mandible. Yes, when the teeth is not in occlusion, and incisal guidance is when the teeth is in occlusion. And coming to the muscles of mastication, yes, these are the muscles of mastication that are very, very essential for the movements of the mandible. And if any of the muscles is not cohabiting with one another, there will be a difficulty in the mandibular movements. Why? Because it is, see these two muscles, that is the lateral pterygoid, which has a upper head and a lower head. And the function of the lateral pterygoid is actually to open the mandible. Whereas the temporalis, the the temporalis and the masseter and muscles like that, what it basically does is it retracts the mandible. So this agonistic and antagonistic activity of the muscles of mastication is also important for the normal mouth opening. For example, when you are trying to open the mouth, it is the lateral pterygoid that should dominate. Initially, it would be 50-50, but gradually when you try to open the mouth more and more, the lateral pterygoid activity becomes 70, 80, 90 like that, and the temporalis muscle activity becomes less. So automatically, when you are trying to overstretch this muscle is being relaxed, and at a stage, it tries to prevent the overstretching of the lateral pterygoid muscle, and that is called as a myotactic stretch reflex. And this myotactic stretch reflex prevents the overextension of these muscles. And if in case this temporalis is not functioning properly, if it is going to extend, the lateral pterygoid is going to extend beyond what the normal reflex could be, this muscle will obviously get paralyzed, and there will be overstretch of this lateral pterygoid muscle, and this is called as the clasp knife rigidity. And there are some border movements, yes, that you should know. Horizontal plane. And see the horizontal plane. Sorry, we will see the horizontal plane. What is in the horizontal plane? The mandibular movements on the right and left. Okay. And during the right and left, what this transition actually takes place is in a kid. Okay. In a kid, what happens is when the kid tries to open the mouth, okay, initially it goes laterally. Whereas when he grows into an adolescent, there is a forward movement and then it moves laterally. So this transition gradually and smoothly takes place during the eruption, and also when the domination of the muscles of mastication takes place. So in that case, if there is any pathology or any problem with the functional muscles, the movement of the mandible will get disturbed. So automatically he will end up with a temporomandibular joint in a horizontal plane. So coming to the midline marking, you should check whether the midlines are coincident in opening and closing. If the midlines are coincident when the mouth is open and when it is closed, there is some kind of functional abnormality of the functional occlusion, especially when there is some high points or something like that. If the patient is able to open the mandible and close the mandible, and if the midlines are say deviated both in opening and closing, there is a permanent bony pathology or bony problem here. So in that case, that is more of a skeletal. Whereas in the first case, because of the functional aberration, the deviation happening, it is more of dental. So coming to the, yes, this is the kind of movement that you can observe in a border movement, especially in a mandible. And coming to the sagittal plane is actually this word. Yes, this picture gives you a clear movement of how the condyle rotates in a sagittal direction. And actually, when you're trying to move the condyle this side, this becomes the working condyle and this becomes the non-working condyle. So what are the movements that is happening in the working and non-working condyle? The working side condyle moves down and medial. See the down and medial, and the non-working side condyle moves downward medial, and the working side condyle moves upward and lateral. So this contrasting movement should happen in harmony. And this side of the condyle gets more prevented by the entoglenoid process here, whereas in this side it is not getting prevented. So this is the sagittal. And mandibular condyles are the most superior retrograde portion. This is called the centric relation. See, the tooth is not in occlusion. And when the tooth gradually occludes, okay, and when the tooth gradually occludes, there is a mild retrusion of the mandible, and that is called a centric relation to centric occlusion equilibrium, which is 0 to 1 millimeter. If it is more than 1 millimeter, then obviously there is an issue. That is, if you try to bite and the mandible moves very much back, and it is called as functional retrusion. And in that case, the functional retrusion, if it is more than 2 to 3 millimeters, then there is a definite problem here. So in that case, what we have to do is you have to relieve the occlusion and program the condyle. So what we do so is we ask the patient to do some command method of exercises, like we ask the patient to say some words like yum, yes, continuously. So what they do is when they say, obviously the condyle goes to a rest position and there will be a space between the maxilla and the mandible, and that will be evident in the teeth in the premolar region of 2 to 4 millimeters. Okay. This 2 to 4 millimeters is recorded and we take a bite registration in the occlusion. And with that bite, what we do is we take the bite more than the 2 to 4 millimeters. So what happens when we take the bite beyond the 2 to 4 millimeters is the mandible here will be overstretched. When the bite is very much large, it will be overstretched. And the muscles that is getting attached here also get the information that it is being stretched more. So obviously, it is like working out the muscles here so that it becomes overstretched, it becomes tight, and the condyle gets adapted to a newer position. So it is a way to train the condyle to a new position. Likewise, you also relieve the centric occlusion and centric relation discrepancy. So why to register the bite inside the oral cavity? Why not do it outside the oral cavity? Because inside the oral cavity, you can actually measure the true centric relation. You can ask the patient to look out for some exercises, muscle exercises, and you can even check the real centric relation and centric occlusion. Whereas in the model, you are not able to do it properly. And also, while doing in the patient's mouth, you also try to correct the skeletal midlines. Okay. Whereas in a model, you have only dental midlines. It is not better, or better to avoid doing it in the patient model rather to do it in the patient itself. Thank you.